This episode is brought to you by Paramount Plus. If you don't already subscribe to Paramount Plus, please use our affiliate link by going to talkthroughmedia.com/Paramount Plus. Using our affiliate link gives us a little credit, which helps us to keep bringing you great content. U.S. residents only.
Hello, and welcome to episode 22 of the Star Trek Picard cast. I'm Brian.
And I'm Kim.
Kim!
Surprise!
Surprise! Ruthie is unable to record this week's episode, but she was able to find a sub, and that's Kim.
Yeah.
Kim, you're no stranger to the network and on this feed, because your Prodigy podcast is on here, but for those of us listeners that don't listen to your podcasts, why don't you maybe tell a little bit about yourself and what you do for the network?
Sure. I have two podcasts. I have Rebinge Deep Space Nine. That's the one that's been going on the longest. I think we're on episode 103 or 104 at this point. We're in season 5, just released episode 3, I believe, today. And I do that with my husband, James. And then we also do a Prodigy podcast, which we call Star Trek Prodigy, a RebingeIt podcast. And that one is obviously on hiatus right now.
Yeah, it's funny. Like, I remember way back when when we were talking about, like, you wanting to do a podcast, and I think I said, well, you could do the podcast on the network here, and and that one thing led to another, and it's hard to believe it's been over 2 years.
It's insane. I don't know where the time has gone, and we've just been plowing through it, doing it every week, no matter what. And so, I can't believe it either that we've passed 100 episodes.
I know, it's just amazing. And and rave reviews. It's a great podcast if you haven't listened to it. And of course, you cover Prodigy for us here. So, I think Prodigy, at least for me, has been a really great surprise. I love it, and I was really skeptical. I wasn't sure I was going to like it when it was announced, but it's really turned out to be a great series, and you guys are doing a great job covering it.
We were skeptical too, I have to say, going in, not really knowing exactly how that show is going to turn out, and hearing that it was a kids show.
Yeah.
And then it started with such a Star Wars feel that I think we were unsure, but what a great show that's turned into be, and we really enjoyed covering it.
Yeah. It did start out a lot, especially that first episode started a lot like a Star Wars show, and it's really been quite the surprise, and I look forward to it continuing and your coverage of it continuing. And I think you've done some interesting things, like bringing on what's her name? Is it Mahi? Yeah, I think she's great.
She's serious. She takes that show really seriously, and she's just waiting for it to come back. She just turned 7, so now she's our 7-year-old correspondent.
Wow. How did you find her?
I used to work with her mother, and I'm still friends with her mother. And I started asking various people that I knew if their kids were going to watch the show. And nobody said yes until I talked to Mahi's mom. And she was like, we are waiting. We are ready for that show. And so I just asked, how about having your daughter come on my podcast? And she was very excited about it. So yeah, it's been fun. I really enjoyed it. And she has family members in India. So when I go and look at the statistics, I can see Mahi's family listening to the podcast in India, which is great.
Yeah, it is. That's great. All right. Well, let's get started on discussing this episode. We are going to be covering season 2, episode 4, titled Watcher. Just before we get to that, we just want to remind you that we provide, I don't even want to say early access because we're so far behind, but early access to a virtually uncensored version of the podcast that we try to go out 24 hours after recording, but it's really not happened so much this week, or these weeks. But we're getting it out earlier to Patreon listeners. So if you are interested in that, and it's a different version for the most part than what goes out to the regular listeners. There's some extra things in there that we leave in and things like that. Extra sausage. So you can get to that as low as $1 a month for being a Patreon subscriber. Go to patreon.com/Brian and Ruthie to sign up and help us out with a podcast that helps to cover coverage such as hosting and the streaming costs and software that we need. There's monthly software that we pay for to help make the podcast sound as good as it does. Anyway, so let's move on and get to this week's episode. It's at season 2, episode 4, titled Watcher. The teleplay is by Juliana James and Jane Maggs. The story is by Travis Fickett and Juliana James, and directed by, for the second episode in a row, Leah Thompson. The description from ParamountPlus.com is as follows. With time running out to save the future, Picard takes matters into his own hands and seeks out an old friend for help. Meanwhile, Rios ends up on the wrong side of the law, and Jurati makes a deal with the Borg Queen. And to get back to what we did last time when that came up.
Yeah.
Yes, because, making a deal with the Borg Queen deserves that sound effect.
Yeah.
We don't have a sound, we don't have a sound effect. We don't have a start date. The air date was March 24th, 2022. The runtime was 45 minutes and 25 seconds. All right, Kim, what would you give Watcher?
I give it 9.2 Guinan upper arm muscles.
She is very muscular, isn't she?
Yeah, she looks great.
Yeah, she does. I give this episode 9.5. I have no idea how this got here.
Nice.
Yeah. All right. We have listener ratings. I'll do the first. Brian from Colorado says, Watcher gets 9 out of 10. Bus boombox guys from me.
Wes from Minnesota says, loved it. This episode gets 10 out of 10. I still hate you songs blasted out of a boombox.
And James, the Augmented Sailor, says, Watcher gets 7.8. Punk rock is way better than any corporate manufactured music put out today. The poor guy was just trying to share.
Yeah, right.
And he's got winky face there. All right. We have listener yeses.
Yes!
Brian from Colorado says, yes, I had complained before about not knowing where the ship landed. This episode, they showed us that it did indeed crash at Chateau Picard. I was really surprised and elated to hear Picard's explanation how his family came to have both French and British roots. That's been a mystery for decades that we finally know the answer. Other things I enjoyed in this episode were the mention of Dixon Hill, the punk on the bus, Kirk Thatcher playing almost the same music as Star Trek IV, and the additional DS9 tie-in with the Sanctuary mention. The Seven and Rafi scenes were funny and well done too.
Yeah, it's funny, that whole thing about Picard, and his British thing. I'm glad that they finally got to that too. Yeah. In fact, Wes mentions it as well. He says, the Picard history is finally explained. For 35 years, we've wondered why Picard is French but speaks with a British accent. I love that. Yeah, it makes you wonder though, why did it take them so long to, to move back? Because it sounds like they were in France for hundreds of years, or sorry, in England for hundreds of years, but.
Yeah, I wonder if they'll ever explain that. Probably not.
Yeah, probably not. He continues, he says, I also love the punk on the bus scene. Thank you, Kirk Thatcher, for reprising it and updating the song. And yeah, so the original song was titled I Hate You. And this song was titled I Still Hate You. Yep. And then he says, the police car chase was hilarious and reminded me of the breakout of Chekhov of the hospital in Star Trek IV. Yeah, I agree with that as well.
Yeah, for sure. James, the Augmented Sailor, says, yes, the Kirk Thatcher cameo. Being a middle-aged punk rocker, it was good to see Kirk still offending bus passengers in 2024 with the revival of his one-hit wonder. Everybody put this in their yeses. I had it in mine too, but...
Yeah.
Then James goes on to say, finally, an explanation for the Frenchman with the British accent. Generations of living outside of a family's home country will definitely change their accent. I like it. Seven's driving. Yep. You could tell she knew the concept, but was just a fish out of water when it came to practical application. It was quite funny. And then he says, Luna, which was the Guinan's dog.
Right. Speaking of Luna, and this is in my yeses, but I figured I'd stick it here. The guy who takes away Luna, whose name is Dale in the show, we had another Q in this show, not just John Delancey at the end. We had another Q in the name of Brian Quinn, who goes by the nickname of Q on Impractical Jokers. He was the guy that played Dale. So it's funny when I watched this, and I was originally, I just watched it on my phone, and I'm like, is that Brian Quinn? And, now that I've got my TV hooked up, I see it now on big screen. I'm like, that's Brian Quinn. So, because that's one show, Practical Jokers. My wife and I watched that religiously. So it was kind of funny to see him on there. All right, Kim, what yeses do you have?
I had a bunch of yeses that nobody else listed. So the first one I have is I really love Girardi in this episode.
Yeah, I did too.
When she calls Picard Mr. a couple of times, and then she also calls him Dixon Hill. And she's got that line where she says, milk, chocolate, hot, when she's sort of making fun of him as a child. I mean, I thought that was great.
Yeah.
Alison Pill is a real standout to me this season.
She is. Most definitely.
I loved Rafi's line when she said, when they're in the police station, I hate everything. And Seven says, but you hide it so well. I mean, that was so funny. Those two are really good together.
They are.
And Seven's costume, I love.
Yeah.
I don't know. They've really upgraded the costumes in Picard compared to TNG for sure.
They did.
I had yes on, it's quite a Picard moment when he's talking to Guinan and he has to talk her into helping him. It was a classic Picard sort of speech.
Yeah.
And when he finally tells her his name and there's just a little hint of the Trek theme, that was really cool.
Yeah. I wondered about that. And I know that some people had talked about that. Like, I wonder if the name Picard, triggered her time feelings or whatever, that she kind of, I don't know, knew that name or knew somehow that she would come across that name. Because there's some other discussion about like that whole Times Arrow stuff, which we'll get to, but I wonder if she just had this vague impression of knowing that name. And so when she hears the name, she's like, oh, okay. I don't think it was so much a Picard deals with the Europa mission so much. Like, I don't know, unless for some reason in this Star Trek universe, that Europa mission is like equivalent to, say, you know, Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins going to the moon on Apollo 11 or something, you know, where everyone knows who they are. I wouldn't think that everyone would know Rene Picard's name, at least at this point.
Right.
So I don't know, but anyway.
Yeah, it seemed more like there was some other kind of deep connection than that.
That was my thought.
I would say yes to when Rios was saying the Star Trek opening, you know, about new worlds and new civilization.
Yeah.
I love it when anybody sneaks that into Star Trek. And then he also said that he's stuck in a primitive past. No offense, which
no offense, yeah,
which I loved. And then my last yes is Guinan's speech when she talks about how hatred never ends and facts aren't facts anymore. I mean, it felt very current, and I liked your delivery of that.
Yeah, and especially, you know, when she said, you know, the hoods were replaced with suits, and you know, unfortunately, I think that's true. You know, there's this whole thing where minorities don't get the advantages that you know, I can't really speak of it because, you know, I'm not a minority. So, but you know what I mean? There's an inequality that needs to be fixed, and you know, I think it will be fixed someday. I think what Picard says, and I go into that in a minute. All right, my yeses are, first, I liked that whole thing about coming up with 15 unconsciously. So I thought that was kind of cool, although I have something I'm going to say about that later. I like the idea of Afkelt, the time sickness, and how Picard went back, said something that she said to him, and, you know, she got sick, and I thought the name was funny, Afkelt. Immediately what I thought of was, you need Aflac. Raffi and Seven breaking into and taking the car. Specifically, I mentioned it in my rating, you know, where she had a phaser and she's like, I don't know where this came from.
Yeah.
There were several good lines of dialogue in this episode, and I'm gonna you mentioned part of the first one, but I've got a clip from it, so I want to just highlight it. The Rios's explanation of his identity to the ICE officer.
Ah, don't cry, Juan. Your luck. Got your seat on that bus. I mean, unless, of course, you've decided to provide your name and proof of citizenship.
All right. My name is Cristobal Rios. You can call me Chris, Rios. Good either way.
Occupation?
Captain of the USS Stargazer. You wouldn't know it. It's a starship from the year 2400. I'm on an ongoing mission to explore strange new worlds, seek out new life and civilizations, but instead I'm stuck back in a particularly primitive past, no offense, trying to correct the timeline so I can, you know. With whom, you ask? A ragtag group of misfits, including one cybernetic queen that I'm fairly certain is in it just to wipe out all of humanity with her own cohort across the old admiral, who, if I understand it correctly, is now a flesh and blood robot? I can't be sure because nobody can explain it to me.
I thought that was so funny because it reminded me of the whole, discussion with Chekhov and talking to the FBI officer in in the voyage home, and also the discussion that Kirk has with Dr. Taylor, where they're having dinner, and he kind of, it's because there's something mentioned later on that also reflects that, I think in episode 8 or something, but where he talks about why he's there, that they're there to get 2 whales to help repopulate the species, but so Rios is like explaining why he's actually there, and of course the officer's like looking at him like he's a crazy man.
I thought it was a nice summary of the show. It helps you get caught up.
Yeah, exactly. Picard says to Guinan, he says, change always comes later than we think it should. And I thought that this is actually very true.
Yeah.
It's something that we don't see mentioned very much, but it's true. It happens all the time. The bus, this is between Raffi and Seven. Raffi says, the bus was faster, and Seven says, maybe you should get back on it.
Those two are so funny.
Yeah. Then the two of them talking to Girardi. Girardi says, you guys really need to work on your communication. And then they both say, Girardi. And then Girardi says, see, there you go. You guys are in sync.
That was great.
And then Guinan says, if you're not the real thing, she'll probably bite your eyelids off. And Picard's response is, that's nice.
Yeah.
I liked that Girardi made them stop to beam. I often wondered about that. We had mentioned before, I think in the last episode we talked about, which, by the way, Kim is editing that episode for us. So thank you, Kim.
You're welcome.
Anyway, we see in the past where we've seen them like running or walking up the stairs and they're, they're beaming, and when they end up on the pad, they're not in that same position. So it was kind of nice to see them actually be stationary than to be beamed while they're in motion. So, but I also have a problem with it that I'll get to later. I like the new tricorders. Of course, they look modern, and I found out in just looking around that they're actually the new tricorders used an actual Samsung Galaxy Z Flip 3 in them, to build them. So if you see a close-up of them, you can actually see that they're made with an actual phone. So I thought that was really cool. And the previous episode, there was a flip, kind of a flip tablet thing or a flip pad, and that was a Samsung Galaxy Z Fold 3. So the other type. But I thought that was pretty cool that they basically used those two real world tech devices to make better looking and functioning props. So, yeah. Girardi again playing the Borg Queen, and when I say playing, I mean kind of getting the Borg Queen where she wanted to be, and only to put her back in her place. So of course this is going to be a recurring theme, I think, as we go forward. Orla Brady is finally back, and she doesn't have ears on, So that's a thing. And the last thing is Q seems to be broken. His powers are not working. So, you know, I don't know what's going on with him. This is weird. And we'll, I guess, know more as we go on, but it's
that was very unexpected.
Yeah, it was very unexpected. So
it even came the episode, you kind of think the episode's over, right? It fades to black. And then we go to the Q scene and he's doing that narration, which was interesting because it's like he was saying what he was trying to do to Rene Picard, and then he snaps his fingers and oops, nothing happened.
Yeah.
That was good.
And it's actually funny in that scene. I'll talk about it when the time comes, but there's a bunch of things for the spot the references section that are in there. So, all right. And now it's time for our nose. No! All right. You want to take the first one?
Sure. Brian from Colorado says, the younger Guinan actor is very good, but I would have preferred the show spend some money and de-age Whoopi and show her much as she looked during TNG. The way this was done for Mark Hamill in the Book of Boba Fett recently shows it's possible and can be quite effective. Still, this didn't bother me much and is a very minor no.
I don't know if it would have worked in this case because this was a long scene, and actually there were several scenes, and I think you get that kind of uncanny valley kind of reaction after a while. And, you know, like we see the de-aging with Data last season, and, you know, it was those weren't long scenes. They were fairly short. And we also see it very, very, very short in the first episode with Q. I just don't think that they could tell this story. There's two problems with this. Okay. The first problem is I don't think that they could tell this story with de-age Guinan with, you know, and for that matter, why would they need to? Like, essentially what the problem is, I was going to say that there's two problems. There's one problem. The problem is Whoopi Goldberg. I don't think Whoopi was available, right? So that's what the whole problem came to, is they didn't have Whoopi available to play all these scenes. So, you know, the whole de-aging of Whoopi is moot. Like, she's not available. And what are you going to do? You're going to put like some other person playing her character and then like animate her, you know, like that would have looked even worse.
Then we'd be complaining about that.
Oh, that would look 10 times worse. So to me, what they've done, I think, makes better sense. And you can't argue with the work that I don't remember her name. I know it starts with an I. Is it Ito or Ita? Ito Agayeri? Agayeri, I think is how you say it. Ito Agayeri. That's my attempt at saying it anyway. I think she's doing a wonderful job. And I thought that she was great in this episode. So, you know, what's not to like? So anyway, I disagree.
Yeah, I disagree too. And I think the scene would have had to have been really short for them to do it. I mean, maybe the only option is to have picked a different character or made up a new character to do this.
Yeah. Yeah, like Guinan's sister or something.
There you go.
Yeah, Wes from Minnesota, he says something similar. He says, no, the use of a different actress to play Guinan in 2024. It was wonderfully acted, but a de-age Whoopi would have been nice. However, it doesn't detract from the enjoyment of the episode. I would like to see this actress reprise the role of Guinan if there are to be more short treks episodes. And I thought it would be nice to see her play Guinan if there were some short treks. I thought that's a wonderful idea you have there, Wes. But like I said, I don't think it would have worked for them to play to have Whoopi play this. Like hopefully, I'm hoping that we see her again at the end of the season, but maybe we will, maybe we won't.
Okay.
Yeah.
James, the Augmented Sailor, says his no is this episode did exactly what I was worried about the show doing, give a slanted socio-political commentary. I don't want leftist or right-winged viewpoints in my Trek. Again, I watched to escape that garbage. We're bombarded with it enough as it is. I served in the military with people that have gone on to become ICE officers, and they're not like they are played here. I'm sure there's a minority of them that are villainous, but the show uses a broad stroke here to paint a picture, and I don't like it. They could have at least had some good officers to offset it. This no hits my rating hard because I believe Trek should be above this kind of thing and at least use some subtlety and discretion. I know this may be an unpopular opinion, but it's how I feel. I don't think that Trek uses subtlety and discretion in things like this ever. I think they often hit you over the head with it.
I 100% agree with you, Kim. When James, Ruthie, LT, and I had a discussion about this very episode and this point earlier this week, and I was bringing up the point about I don't think that they ever are subtle, and the two examples that I brought up were, number one, let this be your last battlefield, which, hello, subtle, no. You got two characters, one black on the white on the one side and white on the other side, just flipped around. Yep. How unsettled could that be? And then you have the Deep Space Nine two-parter past tense, which is actually in the same time frame as this is right now. So, and talks about sanctuary districts and all this stuff, which is in Picard right now. And I don't think that was subtle either. And I don't think that the whole thing about, like, okay, where I agree with you is painting all of the ICE officers as villainous. I think that's wrong to do, and I think that's a stereotype that they didn't really need to go to. I could see them, having a few of them that way, but they don't need to make them all that way. So for that part, I agree with you, but I will say this. I am still an immigrant. I'm not a citizen. I'm here on a green card. Yes, I'm here legally, but I have been detained before, more than once, I will add, in crossing the border. So, and also had to give up possessions when crossing the border. Like literally, I was a radar detector. I had a radar detector, and I crossed the border with it, and I had to give it up. So that was actually going into Canada that happened. But yeah, crossing into the States more than once, I had been detained. So I'm sensitive to it, and I want to hear. I never dealt with ICE in this way, so I don't know whether this is accurate or not. But I do want to know, and I will say if it's not accurate, then I would object because I want to hear it portrayed accurately. But at the same time, I want to see it portrayed, and it seems to me if they didn't cover it, I would think it would be conspicuous by its absence. So that's my take on it.
Especially with the Deep Space Nine episodes about the sanctuary districts.
Yes.
They couldn't really ignore that as part of canon. I think there are frequently problems in fiction where a whole set of people will get painted with a broad brush in order to make a point.
Right.
And that's obviously what they're doing here. And this isn't the first time, and it's not the last time that it's going to happen in Trek. But I mean, I respect James's opinion. I just don't happen to agree with it.
Yeah. And that's exactly my take on it as well. I respect the opinion. I don't agree, but I think both of us can agree to disagree. So, all right, we got one more, and it's also going around the whole Guinan thing. It's from Andy in the Midwest, and he said, I've been reflecting on this for 2 weeks, and I just don't care for Guinan in this episode. I'm fine with recasts when they are necessary, but I just never accepted that this way. I just never accepted that this was Guinan. I think it's a mix of the writing and the acting. I tried imagining Whoopi Goldberg in this scene, and it still doesn't seem like Guinan. We've seen Guinan at an earlier time in her life, and this seems like a real detour in her character. I'm used to her being the wisest one in the room, the one that can stand back and look at everything with a high-level perspective. She seemed too reactive, and it bugs me that Picard had to point out the good around her. I'm curious if I'm alone in this opinion or if others felt the same way. Couple things here I wrote down. First of all, they publicly committed to having Guinan in season 2. That was on The View. So they were going to have her. So I think that this was a novel approach to introducing her to the 21st century and, the 21st century that we have right now. I think that the actress did a great job in the role. Now, okay, so let's look at this for a second. This is the whole time issue that we'll get to in a minute, but it goes around this. It's like, okay, did she meet Picard in 1890 something San Francisco? The understanding that I have is because Picard came from this alternate future, she did not. Okay, so this version of Guinan never met Picard in 1890 San Francisco. Okay, so perhaps that put her along a different path, and she never had that optimistic view that she developed later, right? So that's what I'm thinking, is that the version of Guinan that we're seeing today is not the same version that we would have seen if Picard had gone back to San Francisco. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. I think that's good headcanon.
It's the only way I could explain it.
Well, I think it's also possible that the turning point for her maybe hasn't happened yet. Maybe until we get through the events of past tense and through the sanctuary districts and the tearing down of that and the change in humanity that is supposed to come after that, maybe she was getting a little bit cynical on Earth with the things that she was seeing and being a part of, and even feeling herself because of the color of her skin. So maybe that actually was impacting her a bit. I read an interview with this actress who said she was a huge Next Gen fan and that she had watched all the episodes and rewatched the episodes with Guinan to sort of get a feeling for her. And I agree, she was maybe a little bit more reactive here than what we would have expected the Whoopi Goldberg version of the character to be. But I did think she was relatively measured. And I guess in my head, I was thinking this conversation and this interaction with Picard may be the beginning of her going into that even more measured person and the more thoughtful person that she becomes later.
You may be right. You may be right. All right. Well, that is it for our listener no's. Kim, what do you have for no's?
I only have 2 no's. The first one is, I agree with you that I like the 15s, but I thought they got to the answer of the date of the 15th awfully fast.
I agree with that. Yeah.
First it was like, oh, is it 15 hours? No, that's too specific. Well, then it must be this date.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just thought that was quick. And then my other no is about what you were just talking about, where I was trying to figure out, okay, wait, if it's a different Picard or a different timeline, then he doesn't go back. So the future changed the past. And I did think that was a little mind-bending to believe that we had somehow changed the 1800s by changing the future.
Yeah.
So it just wasn't working for me.
It is a bit of a mind bend, but essentially what I came up with was like a version of what I think the co-showrunner said. Terry, I keep struggling with his name, but I'll say it. Terry Matalas said, and it was kind of like, well, because of the future changing, that Picard never got to go back. So so essentially, and that's kind of what I had in my head, because otherwise it doesn't make any sense. But yeah, I mean, essentially, and I brought up on the episode, actually it was 2 episodes back, season 2, episode 2, is I was wondering if we're going to get some kind of like Back to the Future thing with this, because if you recall, when Marty and Dr. Brown end up going, actually Marty, not Dr. Brown, but when Marty goes back to the future and comes back from Hill Valley 1955, what he comes back to is a different future, right? It's a much fancier house, and they've got, he's got a Jeep or something like that. I don't know, but he's got a fancier car, and his dad's a novelist, and Biff works for him instead of the other way around,
right?
So it's a different future. So it's I wonder if essentially that's what we're going to get. We'll get them, going back, and the 2400 that they left will be different than it'll be different than the totalitarian 2400, but it may even be different than the 2400 that we knew. So I don't know. I hope not, but we'll see.
I guess we will.
Yeah, it's the only thing we could see. Speaking of timeline stuff, I had wondered, I mentioned about the beaming stationary, but I wondered if doing it in front of the police like that could somehow affect the timeline, because it's like this is different than it being on a security monitor or something like that. This happened in front of witnesses, and they're they got guns pulled on them, and then suddenly there's this shimmering light and they're gone. So to me,
cameras too.
Yeah. So to me, yeah, that's true. I mean, they're wearing their cameras, and anyway, to me, that just makes me think that it could have affected the timeline. But what can you do? And then also, just a general thing, I'm seeing a lot of similarities between this story, like for the season. It's almost like a 10-episode version of Star Trek 4.
Yeah.
Slightly, modified, but there's, the whole like Doctor and Rios timeline versus Dr. Gillian Taylor and Kirk, and so I just wonder if they could have developed something that was a little less familiar. So that's my take on that.
I had a similar feeling about the last season of Discovery being a 13-episode version of the motion picture.
Yeah.
Because I had not seen the motion picture until recently, and I thought, hey, this is awfully familiar. But yeah, I get what you mean.
Yeah. Well, in a lot of ways too, season of Discovery reminded me of the previous season of Discovery a little bit. Global calamity or whatever. There were a lot of similarities there, and for that matter, the similarities between Picard season 1 and Discovery season 2. So it just they keep kind of like retreading the same kind of stories.
Definitely.
All right, so let's move on and go to our not good enoughs.
All right.
Not good enough, damn it! Not good enough.
All right, want to do Brian?
Sure. Brian from Colorado says, neither Guinan nor Picard mentioned the events of Time's Arrow. Guinan had met Picard in Victorian-era San Francisco and should very well remember him. Plus, Picard was there and should have brought this up. That's really not excusable and is the reason I knocked off a whole point in my rating for what was otherwise a near-perfect episode for the Picard series.
Well, we kind of talked about that already just now. If they had gone straight from the auto-destruct to 2024, then yes, you would think that there'd be no question Guinan would know Picard. That there'd have to be the case. But for them getting put into an alternate future like this, or alternate present, I guess, for 25th century, whatever, that changes the variables. So that's my take, and that's what we talked about before. So we're going to keep talking about it, I think. Wes from Minnesota says the Department of Temporal Investigations or the 29th Century Federation are going to have a field day with this crew once the timeline is restored. First, Rios revealed exactly who he was. Second, Seven and Raffi were beamed out of the squad car in front of an LAPD officer.
Yep.
And like speaking of what I had said before, and that I thought, like, is she gonna have like nightmares about what happened to this guy I shouldn't say this guy. What happened to the crew here? Why are they gone? And or is she gonna have these weird dreams about it, and have to seek therapy, lose her job over it or something,
could change could change her future quite a bit.
Exactly. Yeah.
Or she might just talk herself into, it was some kind of a holographic trick and they weren't really there and the car was being controlled remotely by Elon Musk or somebody. I don't know.
Yeah.
She might have been able to talk herself into something.
Yep.
James, the Augmented Sailor, says Thatcher's reaction to Seven seemingly being aware of a prior neck pinch from Spock is a paradox and inconsistent with how they handled the Time's Arrow situation. Inconsistent writing here, guys. It only gets an NGE, not good enough, though, because it was a fun scene and wasn't there to further any plot points.
And this is where, the more I think about it, the more I kind of go back and forth, and I ask, is it inconsistent though? I mean, I don't know. I'm like, I don't know for sure if it is, because the entry points and the exit points are different. The way I was envisioning it is that if you have Picard and 1890 whatever San Francisco, and you have 2280, and then you have 1986 San Francisco, it's kind of like within itself. So would that kind of happen within what happened with the other timeline? I don't know. Maybe. So your point, I can't disagree with it. I can't agree with it either, because I don't know. That's my take on it. It's possible. It's possible that you're right, that it's inconsistent, but there's no, I don't know. I just don't have, I don't know. What do you think?
I guess when I watched it, I didn't think that he was reacting because he remembered the neck pinch. In fact, I didn't even think about it until I read it in James's note. I thought that they were making a commentary about a sort of kinder, gentler human in the future. I guess I just was looking at it differently. Like, he was reacting differently. He had maybe a higher level of emotional intelligence than he appeared. And it was telling me not to judge a book by the cover, by just looking at him and thinking he was going to react badly. So I had like a whole different journey with that moment than what James had.
It's funny that you say that, different emotional awareness. Because, it's kind of like, I just like the song.
Well, we don't know what's happened to him in the last 20 years. It could have been a reaction to that, not a reaction to that one thing that happened on the bus or didn't happen, depending upon the future.
Well, because, definitely could have been something else. But I don't know. I mean, if you think about it, who's to say that Spock and Kirk from the Confederation didn't go back and do the same thing? Maybe they went to get whales. Who knows? So I just...
it's a good point. Maybe somebody else had to save the whales. The same thing happened.
Exactly. Who knows?
Well, James also says in his Not Good Enoughs, replacing Guinan for the 21st century. I get it. She looks a lot older now than in TNG, so it throws off her appearance in TNG, but they already set a precedent with having her appear in Time's Arrow, unaltered from the 19th century to the 24th. I just think they could have done something to have Whoopi here.
And I just think that the reason why they didn't have it is availability. I just think that Whoopi was only available to do essentially a cameo and not available to do something more. And so they gave her the scenes in the first episode, and maybe we'll see her again in the 10th episode. Maybe we won't. We don't know. But and I should say, I guess, for posterity, that Kim and I have seen up to episode 9 at the time of recording. This is being recorded on May 1st. So we don't know. And right. But the thing that I took from this is that that Whoopi Goldberg was probably not available for all of those scenes. Otherwise, I think she would have loved to do it. And she was probably too busy with The View and, her other projects. I mean, I heard her a couple weeks ago on Howard Stern, and I think this was an interview from a couple of months ago or something like that. And she's a very busy woman. Like, it's not just The View that she's doing. She's got multiple projects on the go all the time. So, this is probably all that they were able to get her, and she was probably, really happy to do it. But, getting her to do 5 or 6 episodes of a season is probably not realistic. So,
yeah.
Anyway, that's my take. I'll keep saying that.
Okay.
Kim, what do you have for Not Good Enoughs?
I have a couple things. One of the conversations that James and I had when we were watching it is that he was really annoyed that the comms weren't working. And he thought that the excuses about the comms not working was not good, because they kept saying there was a lack of relays. And we were like, that would imply that there would have to be relays in place in all of the other times when the communicators had worked, including when they've gone back to the past, but also when they're on other planets, their communicators still work. So that one just was a little questionable, I would say.
I mean, maybe they work, I don't know, better from orbit or something, but I don't know. Yeah, James brings up a good point.
And I also had here that I was worried they didn't clear out the chimney before they started the fire in the abandoned chateau. I thought it would have filled the whole place with smoke, so I made that not good enough.
Oh, and definitely. Yeah.
I also put that Guinan really needs to lock her front door when she's closed. It's like, come on, you're closed. Lock the door.
Yeah. Yeah. You would think it's just like, hey, come on, take everything.
Right.
Yep.
That's all I had.
Yep. I wondered, why is there an abacus there? It seemed a very peculiar thing to put there. And for that matter, why is there 100 and some odd year old wine just sitting there?
That's a good question.
You would think that someone would have rated, because I would have to think that 109-year-old wine would be worth something. I don't
Or
know.
It might be terrible.
Yeah, I was going to say it might be terrible, but still. Yeah, because the other thing, they went into the chateau to eat. So I'm like wondering, okay, well, what is there to eat in this abandoned chateau?
Nothing. Yeah.
But the other thing,
well, they went in to get warm.
Yeah.
Because it was really cold
true.
on the ship, apparently.
That's true. The other thing was the kid that they cast to play the young Picard didn't look at all like the young Picard in Rascals at all. So, I mean, I can deal with it, though, with some minor thing, but I just remembered that, the Picard, the kid that played Picard in Rascals, and it was, of course, the same kid that played Renee, the nephew in Family, didn't look at all like him. But then again, they replaced that kid. They had a different kid that played him in the movie in Generations, right? It wasn't the same kid. So anyway,
and that kid's like 50 now.
Yeah, I know. Kills me. All right. So that's it for our not good enough section. Let's now open hailing frequencies. All right. We only have one voicemail this week. And guess who it's from? Come on.
Jeff.
Yes, it's from Jeff.
Hello, Star Trek fans. It's Jeff X-Force 11 leaving my feedback about Picard Watcher. This episode was excellent. I'm loving Leah Thompson's work. She's been doing a great job directing genre TV. She directed the last episode of Picard and this one. She's directed a couple episodes of Resident Alien. She's done several episodes of Stargirl. And she's just doing a great job. I really liked the twist of having Guinan in the past and this being their first meeting, and thinking about how it shapes her relationship with Picard. And the fact that she knows, oh my goodness, this is just mind-blowing to think about her keeping that from him all these years. And the Watcher actually being, we think is Loris, but I doubt it. Maybe it's just somebody in that form. And Q not having his powers anymore. This is just an excellent series. I'm just loving this season even more than last, and I just really dig it. I like how they are keeping it Star Trek while yet being in the past and providing such a good balance on things, and I'm just loving it. All right, those are my thoughts. X-Force is out.
Well, thank you so much, Jeff. X-Force 11. Keeping that streak alive. And I happen to know that he has given us feedback for the next 5 episodes, so that streak will continue at least until episode 9. So yeah, a couple of things that you brought up I thought were interesting. The whole Guinan thing, I mean, kind of talked about that, but assuming somehow that this Guinan and the Guinan that Picard knows somehow, I don't know, intertwine. Because how that'll all figure out itself is I don't know, but it is kind of, it's hard to figure out. But if she recalls this when the time happens, this will be the second time that she's had, reaction to or a meeting with Picard. And I don't know. It's interesting though, but it makes sense that it would have to take something like this to build that kind of relationship. And I wonder, I've always wondered like how it developed itself within the 24th century, because we still haven't seen that.
Right.
Laris, and it is interesting that we see someone who appears to be Laris, at least, as a watcher. And, it's good to see Orla Brady back. But the idea of Q and missing his powers, I talked about that earlier, but we've seen Q without powers, right? We saw that, was it Deja Q? Is that the name of it? This is the one episode that had Corbin Burnson in it.
Yes.
That's how I always remember it. It's from the one that had Corbin Burnson as another Q. Anyway, we've seen him without powers, but this one seems to be different in a way. Like he's got, I don't know, some powers, obviously, but not all of his powers, or he's got.
It seems like they're fading.
Yeah.
Instead of just being gone.
That's a good way to put it, fading. Because otherwise, like, how did he make? Oh, I can't say that. That's in the future. So I nearly said something I shouldn't have said. No spoilers. But anyway, that's what it seems like. He's got some powers, but obviously his powers are fading, and his reaction. I mean, he does get a reaction out of actually, we don't even know that that's. Do we know that that's her at this time, or is that a spoiler?
No, we don't know.
Okay. The girl, just in getting her to laugh instead of getting her fears to show up. That's certainly a different reaction than expected. So I think that that'll all make sense next episode, ladies and gentlemen, if you're watching the episodes along with the podcast. Anyway, that's it from now. Do you have anything you want to add, Kim?
I wondered if the actress who plays Laris, I wonder if they brought her back into this role because of how popular she was in season 1. I mean, I know there was a lot of feedback on Twitter about how much people love that character. I wonder if that's what brought her back.
I think definitely.
Because she's great.
Yeah, I think definitely so.
Also, I love Jeff X-Force 11. I love how positive he is. He always gives good feedback. So happy to hear from him.
Yeah. Yeah. And he also is, he gives you guys a lot of feedback too, doesn't he? Yep. Yeah. On both shows, right?
Yeah. He's, well, we don't do feedback all the time on Deep Space Nine. We just do it at the end of the season. But yeah, he always gives us feedback then. But for Prodigy, he was giving us feedback as the episodes came out. Yep.
Yeah. All right, cool. So we have one more bit of feedback. Kim, why don't you take that one?
James, the Augmented Sailor, says, overall, this episode would have been great if not for my huge no. The Times Arrow paradox took me forever to wrap my head around, though. Cue Ruthie and the Doctor Who sang, which is wibbly wobbly, timey-wimey.
Yeah.
Okay. At least Guinan did seem to have her temporal echoes, though, with the time sickness and giving an indication of recollection when Picard finally gave his name. I'm also really liking the Jurati Borg Queen dynamic. I feel like Jurati is going to come out of this season as a much stronger character. Can't wait to hear everyone's thoughts.
Yep.
Then he says, I wanted to also clarify that I know Trek has always worked in socio-political commentary into their writing, be it civil rights, women's rights, etc., but it's always been done tastefully, subtly, intelligently, and creatively. To me, what was done in this episode was just come straight out and beat you over the head with it. And that's why it was such a turnoff for me.
Yeah, and I just, I talked about it before. I think it often is, beat you over the head with it. And I don't have a problem with it,
We talk about that a lot in Deep Space Nine when they're making their statements, like even in past tense. There's a lot of beat you over the head with that stuff in those episodes.
Yeah.
But I think when it affects you, you feel it more.
Yeah.
And I get that he's feeling it more than maybe we are because it's not something that has hit us over the head quite as hard.
Yeah. And plus, like he said in his feedback, he said he knows friends of his that are, ICE officers, and
you take it personally.
Yeah. I get it. I totally get it. And, and like we said, I'm an immigrant. James is an immigrant. So we both kind of experienced that from that end of it. So, it's just, when I say James, I mean, Kim's James and not James's James. Anyway, just to be clear. But anyway, that's my take on it. So
I take every Ferengi episode very personally. So I understand that he takes this personally.
Yep. Kim is not a fan of the Ferengi. And and I understand it. Believe me, I do. I do. I do. All right. So that's it for our listener feedback. So we have notes. So Kim, what do you have for notes?
I wrote down that Picard talks about his ancestors hiding in the tunnels below the chateau, and then he says they went to England, which made it sound like they took the tunnels all the way to England, which I thought, that's a long walk.
Yeah, the English Channel.
Yeah, right. And then the queen, the Borg queen, poking at Jurati reminds me of the founder woman poking at Odo with that nobody likes you manipulation.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, I have heard this before, and I don't like it. I don't like when the founder woman does it to Odo, and I don't like what she's doing here because she's trying to undermine the little confidence that Jurati already has. And I just find that so upsetting. It's such a cruel thing to do to another person. Let's see. I also had, when Picard says that afternoon naps and jigsaw puzzles aren't quite his speed, because I laughed at that because I'm pretty sure that Patrick Stewart enjoys an afternoon nap and a jigsaw puzzle.
That's probably why they put it in there.
I think so.
Yeah.
And then the last note I took was, I'm not sure why when Guinan gave up her dog, I just started crying. I'm not even a dog person. I'm a cat person, but I felt so bad that she had to give up that dog.
Yeah. I know what you mean. I definitely know what you mean. The one thing that I'm noticing a lot in this particular version of Picard is there's a lot of product placement. And we see more of it coming up in a few episodes to come. But there was one that I thought was kind of subtle, and that was we see an old style Ford Bronco that Guinan is driving. And I'm thinking, why did they use that? They probably used that because the new Ford Bronco is coming out and they didn't have one. So
hard to get.
Yeah, and they are hard to get. So so instead she had like a vintage Ford Bronco, which I know are worth a lot of money if you get one that's restored, and that one was clearly restored. But we also see like the Ford Interceptors and things like that, which I guess is a normal thing to see. But when I was looking for a vehicle recently, I saw a lot of those like used. So I like, oh, that's one of those Ford Interceptors with the souped up engine and extra like they're a Ford Explorer, but they're like really souped up, and that's why they're used by police forces, because they're like they got like a really souped up engine and extra, suspension and stuff like that, and they're designed to, for high speed chases and all that stuff. So anyway, but there was a lot of different other like drinks that Guinan had in her bar, stuff like that. Like there was, I don't know, there was some kind of scotch or something that she had. I couldn't make it out, but that was something that was a product placement. And like I said, later on, there's some blatant product placement that I'll get to when we get to those episodes. All right. And now is the time for the Spot the References section. The first thing that I noticed was the Europa program seems to have the slogan "To boldly go." So there was that. And I should mention that some of these I got from me watching the show, and some of it I'll also give credit to the Trek Culture channel and some of the things that they pointed in their I forget what they call it, ups and downs of this episode. So in their cetacean observations, I said Cretacean at first. Anyway, cetacean observations. Kirk Thatcher, of course, returns as the older punk with the updated version of I Hate You. That's titled I Still Hate You. And if you listen to it, the lyrics are different. The song is the same. We see Sorry and Brandy. That's the one with the weird bottle. That's at her bar. Guinan keeps a gun under her bar, just like she did in the TNG episode of Night Terrors. We see a few references to the TOS episode, The City on the Edge of Forever. There is a boxing poster on the outside wall that we see Picard being in front of, and there's a similar boxing poster that we see Kirk and Spock be in front of, and I think it says Madison Square Garden or something, but obviously that's not here. And I think that was in New York. This is LA, but anyway. There was also a Floyd's barbershop in both, and of course, Edith Keeler was running the 21st Street mission, and we see Guinan, donate some stuff to the 21st Street mission. That's what the canopy was. There's a Sanctuary District poster, which is, of course, the reference to the episode Past Tense that we talked about. Rios says to the not to the ice officer, but says to the doctor that the ice officer has a face like a Ferengi. I thought that was funny.
Yep.
And I said it earlier about how it reminds me of the Star Trek 4, and specifically what Kirk says to Dr. Taylor and the interview that Chekhov has with the FBI officer aboard the USS Enterprise. Coming out of, at the end of the episode, the girl and Q are coming out of a building that's Jackson Roykirk Plaza. Jackson Roykirk was the creator of Nomad, and Nomad was the, whatever you want to call it, the artificial life form in that scene in the TOS episode, The Changeling, and was supposedly the creator of the DY-100 class ship, which is the same class that Khan and the rest of the augments are put aboard. So that's pretty deep reference. Q's newspaper Another past tense reference. It says Brenner fights unionization. And of course, Chris Brenner was the industrialist that kind of befriends Dax, and we see him in that episode. And the last thing, the girl that we see, she is reading a Dixon Hill novel. And of course, Girardi had mentioned Dixon Hill earlier in the episode, but she's reading a Dixon Hill novel titled The Pallid Sun, and that's by Tracy Torme. Tracy Torme was the person who wrote the episode The Big Goodbye and was supposedly the writer of the Dixon Hill novels, but Tracy Torme was a writer on season 1, and I believe some of season 2 of Next Gen. So, and he went on to create Sliders. So,
and one of the co-showrunners, I think, was a producer on 12 Monkeys, and I think there's a link to 12 Monkeys, right, with the Pallid Man.
Oh, okay.
So I think that was a reference too. And what about the link with Assignment Earth?
Oh, yeah, of course. Assignment Earth. Yes.
Because the beaming at the end when he gets together with Laris looks a lot like how it looks in Assignment Earth, which I went and watched this afternoon to remind myself.
Yeah, and supposedly a watcher and
right.
What did they call them in Assignment Earth?
He says he's a supervisor.
A supervisor. Okay.
Yeah. Gary 7.
And that comes up as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
So Assignment Earth is a good assist there. adding one for the spot the references. All right. That's it for our spot the references. So now we move on to our shipwide announcements. And most of the shipwide announcements are courtesy of Wes Huntington. So we've got our news. Thank you, Wes, in advance.
Thanks, Brian and Ruthie. I'm Wes Huntington, one of the 2 co-hosts of the Twin Cities Trekkies podcast. This week's episode of the Writing Room featured Leah Thompson. Host Will Wheaton interviewed her and how she got the directing gig on Star Trek Picard, which found out was due to executive producer Terry Matalas. And they talked about other things regarding Star Trek and stuff like that, and how she became a fan of Star Trek. She's been a fan since she was little. There was also a featurette on the 2024 Guinan, as well as other things as well. There was also a sneak peek at episode 5 of season 2, entitled Fly Me to the Moon, which included the Borg Queen, played by Annie Wershing, trying to intercept all of the local cell tower frequencies so she can hear a cacophony of voices similar to the Borg Collective. Here's what's making news this week in the Star Trek universe for all you Talk Through Media Star Trek podcast listeners. First reported by Paramount Plus as a mistake earlier in the week and was officially announced on Friday, March 25th, Star Trek, the motion picture, the director's edition, will get its 4K Ultra HD restoration premiering exclusively on Paramount Plus on Tuesday, April 5th, which is Star Trek First Contact Day. There will also be a limited theatrical run courtesy of Fathom Events, which will be on May 22nd, 23rd, and May 25th. Tickets will be available starting April 8th. There will also be a physical media release of this version in September. Don't know the exact date yet. In the Star Trek Picard Season 2 episode Watcher, you may have noticed that this Guinan did not know Jean-Luc Picard from his previous encounter in the past with Guinan. This turned a lot of fans on their ears and heads, going like, why didn't she recognize him? And stuff like that.
Yeah.
Why didn't she do that? Well, according to series executive producer Terry Matalas, he said, quote, this Guinan wouldn't remember Picard because in this alternate timeline, the TNG episode Time Zero never happened. Because there was no Federation, those events did not play out the same. No previous relationship exists. However, she was likely traveling to Earth, and as we know, hung around a bit. So this Guinan is different. But she, of course, can sense something is off. She is going through a time sickness thanks to Q's meddling with the timeline. Did you know that Nichelle Nichols from Star Trek the original series and the subsequent films is on the National Aviation Hall of Fame's induction list? She has volunteered her time to promote NASA's programs and to recruit diverse astronauts, including women and minorities. This was posted on their page to celebrate Women's History Month on March 21st. The ceremony will take place in late September. Actor, director, and educator LeVar Burton from Star Trek The Next Generation will receive the first ever Insight Award from the Library of American Broadcasting Foundation, LABF, in recognition of his extraordinary contributions to broadcasting, history, and American culture. Burton will be honored during the MAB show Welcome on Monday, April 25th in Las Vegas. Reflective of LABF's purpose, the Insight Award recognizes an individual or organization for an outstanding artistic or journalistic work or body of work that enhances the public's understanding of the role, operation, history, or impact of media on our society. Dr. Mae Jemison, the first woman of color to travel in space and the first ever astronaut to appear on an episode of Star Trek, is to be honored at Washington University in St. Louis, Missouri. Jemison will receive an honorary Doctor of Laws degree and will present the 161st commencement speech to this year's graduating class. University Chancellor Andrew D. Martin made the announcement March 20th at a special toast to the upcoming graduates. Twin Cities Trekkies is a weekly podcast dedicated to everything Star Trek. My podcast co-host Mackenzie Flickinger and I talk about everything from the original series all the way to the upcoming Strange New Worlds. New episodes are released every Wednesday. You can find Twin Cities Trekkies on every platform you can think of for podcasts. Our social media handles is TC Trekkies Pod for both Facebook and Instagram. You can also reach us by emailing us at tctrekkiespodcast@gmail.com, or you can leave us voice messages when you find the podcast at anchor.fm/Twin Cities Trekkies.
Well, thank you so much, Wes, for your news. It's very, very helpful for you to do that for us. It's greatly appreciated. And you do such a good job as well. So, yeah, worth saying. So essentially, that's the issue, is that it never happened. So that's why she doesn't recognize him. So but it is kind of a timey-wimey thing.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. All right. So now we have the Parrots, and we have something that's actually the first time that I've ever seen this in. I don't think I've ever seen what I'm about to say. Maybe it happened in 2020, but I don't think so. I'm talking about when Picard first came out. We had the week that this came out, March 19th to the 25th, Star Trek Picard and Star Trek Discovery were on the top 10 of the digital analytics or digital originals of Parrot Analytics. So we have to say, whoa, that's not the one I thought it was going to be. That's not it. Is it this one? No, I guess it's. That's what I meant to do. And I also meant to do.
Oh, man.
Anyway, so Picard was even at 31.8 times the average demand of a show, sitting at number 4 behind Stranger Things was number 1, moving. Looks like it had moved up. The Mandalorian had moved down to number 2, and Our Flag Means Death at the number 3, which is an HBO Max show. I don't really know anything about that show. Star Trek Discovery was sitting in the number 10 position, and it had gone up because it wasn't in the top 10 the previous week, at 26.2 times the average demand of a show. The previous week, Picard was at number 4 at 32.8 times, and it had gone down from, I think it was at number 3 the previous week. And I don't know what Discovery was, but it definitely wasn't in the number 3. And obviously, it's picking up the numbers that it's picking up. It's picking up the numbers from the previous week. So this is showing the demand because Discovery's finale was on March 17th. So that's why we're seeing it here. So people were talking about the finale. So that's it for our news and our analytics stuff. So to submit your theories and feedback, go to talkthroughmedia.com/feedback, where you can submit text or audio. Call 216-232-6146 and leave a voicemail. You can email us at picardcast@talkthroughmedia.com. You can post in our designated episode thread in our Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/Star Trek TTM podcasts. You can tweet us at PicardCast or Star Trek TTM. And you can also, our Instagram is Star Trek TTM. If you would like to support the podcast, you can like us on our page on Facebook. That's our podcast network page. That's at facebook.com/talkthroughmedia. And while you're there, you can write us a review actually on that page. You can share our posts on Facebook, retweet us on Twitter, and like our Instagrams when we actually post there. So really got to get better at doing that. Subscribe to us, our Talk Through Media YouTube channel as well. Just look for Talk Through Media. And those episodes go out there first before they make the podcast feed. So look from there. You can subscribe to us at Apple Podcasts or the podcast client of your choice. And while you're there in Apple Podcasts, you can give us a rating or review. And there are several other places where you can give a rating or review, like podchaser.com. We're there. You can rate and review the podcast and even rate and review individual episodes. Finally, the best way to support us and to keep the lights on is to support us via Patreon, where you can do so for as little as $1 a month. That's at patreon.com/Brian and Ruthie. We'd like to thank our Patreon supporters. That's as of May 1st, our Patreon supporters are Andrew Davis, Morning Pace, Trey, Mike, Robert Kaiser, Jeff Gentry, Kevin Lyle, Michael Carrier, Aaron Mays, Brian Shiro, Kim Vogley. I hope I get your name right.
That is correct.
Yay! Kyle McAdams, James Robbins, and Lawrence Todd. And all of our podcasts through the Talk Through Media network can be found on the Talk Through Media all-inclusive feed, and that includes Kim's Rebinge DS9. Do you prefer us saying DS9 or Deep Space Nine? I wanted to ask
when you go
that.
to search for it on Apple Podcasts, you would find it under Rebinge Deep Space Nine.
Well, then I will say Rebinge Deep Space Nine from now on. The Star Trek Discovery podcast, the Star Trek Picard cast, the Star Trek Lower Decks podcast, soon to be the Star Trek Strange New Worlds talk through, and the Star Trek Prodigy by RebingeIt, of course. And of course, thank you, Kim, for being here tonight to do this podcast with me.
My pleasure. Thank you for asking me.
And of course, the Walking Dead talk through, and Kyle and LT, of course, who you know from the Lower Decks podcast, are continuing the Walking Dead talk through. They're now into the Fear the Walking Dead talk through, and are covering season 7B of Fear the Walking Dead. And from everything I've heard, you should send your condolences to them, because I hear it's not very good. Anyway, the next episode on this podcast, the Star Trek Picard cast, is season 2, episode 5, titled "Fly Me to the Moon." It is written by Cindy Apple, directed by Jonathan Frakes. Number 1. The description from ParamountPlus.com is: Picard discovers an important person from his past may be integral to the divergence in the timeline. Q continues his manipulation of the timeline, taking an interest in Dr. Annam Sung. Seven and Raffi attempt a daring rescue of Rios, while Jurati faces the consequences of her deal with the Borg Queen.
Oh, no.
So until next time, I'm Brian.
And I'm Kim.
Peace and long life.
Live long and prosper.